you need to take time, make habits that rejuvenate you. As teachers, I think we often put ourselves last. We put ourselves on that back burner. It's important to take some time for you, self-care habits. This idea that we, as teachers, as educators, we pour into our job, we pour into our students, we pour into our schools and our communities. And oftentimes it's expected, maybe in some way, or we feel that it's expected that we should put ourselves last. And I would say that making time for yourself, to rejuvenate yourself, is going to pay huge dividends with your students and their success. I heavily encourage you to take the time to pour into yourself. Find out really what works for you. Hey teachers, welcome to the Lead, Serve, Teach podcast, where we explore the intersection of leadership, education, and personal growth. I'm your host, D. Paul Miller, and I'm so glad that you've joined me here for a little real talk. So I've got a question to ask. And you know, I oftentimes say in education and learning, well, really one of the best places to always start is a question. So that's where I'm going to start today with a question. So as educators, as teachers, do you ever feel like the day is running you instead of you running your day? If you've ever wondered that, well, you're in the right place. We're going to be talking today about the impact of routines and habits, and really looking at the power behind routines and habits and how to create the ones that really support you as a teacher and making a huge impact on your students, rather than having maybe routines and habits that actually add stress to your life and actually maybe distract from your true purpose as an educator. So let's dive in.
How do you develop a consistent routine?
So what I've learned is to study the habits of the wealthy. They wake up earlier. They read 10 pages of a book every day. They work out. That to me is the basis. And then what I do is I try to figure out if this is where I'm at and I know who I am is not going to get me where I want to go, then I got to study the people that are further along and ask myself what habits do they have in their life? And then I add those to my day.
Let's start with the basics. You know, routines and habits, they're similar. Most people would in fact probably say, yeah, they're the same thing. But I feel like maybe they play a different role in our lives, and kind of want to share my opinion as far as the difference, maybe my personal definition about the difference in routines and habits. You know, routines I kind of see as something that we intentionally set out a sequence of actions that we put into play so that our life is easier. It's a little bit more efficient. Maybe if you're like me, maybe you start your morning with a little bit of coffee. You know, one of the routines that I put into place in my life is simply saying the night before, I'm going to set up my coffee maker with some coffee, with some fresh, clean water, and I'm going to set a timer on it so that when I wake up, my coffee's ready. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to spend any time. And it helps me get out the door a little bit faster in the morning when I'm going to work. Simple routine. Habits to me are like this intentional choice that you kind of have to push yourself to make every day. It's something where it can become almost routine, but really there's something specific about a habit in my mind, in my opinion, where it's leading to growth. It's leading to push you to stretch, to do something great. Those are habits, you know, they're actions that we really, I feel like that we build into our lives that stretch and challenge us. For example, maybe you start waking up earlier every morning just so that you can dedicate a little bit of time. Maybe it's only 5 or 10 minutes to reading, maybe some personal development, or maybe it's just a moment to sit up and maybe read the Bible or read something that's going to help you meditate or you know, just improve your mindset in the morning. It's so important to really start, you know, having some habits that are going to change you, get you outside of your comfort zone. You know, last episode, we watched a video clip from Chris Williamson, and in that he was talking about this idea, this mindset that typically everything we really want, those goals, those things that really matter, the things that really have value, typically are right outside your comfort zone. Sometimes we have to develop habits that actually push us beyond our comfort zone. Maybe they push us past our fears. As my good friend Jack Canfield, co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, says, typically everything we want is right beyond where our fears reside. And so that's something that I want to talk about today is this idea that, yeah, we set routines in our lives. These routines make us more organized. Maybe they reduce decision fatigue. But habits, on the other hand, they can really be something that stretch us, to challenge us, that make us grow and oftentimes get outside our comfort zone. In education, I think we as teachers, as educators, oftentimes we set stretch growth or stretch goals for our students. We want to challenge them to grow, to learn, to get better, to improve. And I think sometimes we take ourselves and we set ourselves on the back burner, if you will, when it comes to setting these stretch goals. Really, in many cases, these stretch goals, I think, need to start with setting or picking or choosing a stretch habit, what I'm going to call a stretch habit. It's something that, you can adopt into your life. You can make this decision. I'm going to do this every day. And it's something that is going to build your self-belief. It's going to inspire you to achieve greater things. This kind of habit has the power to not only elevate yourself and your teaching, but also create a lasting impact on your students and really recreate your learning environment, your classroom environment, and what it really is, what the students are gaining from you as a leader in their life. Dan Martell, he's a very successful entrepreneur. He posted a video and it just really struck me because, he emphasizes the importance of creating systems and habits that really align with your greater goals, your bigger goals in life, the ones that really matter. Interesting takeaway I had from it is it's not really about doing more. I think when people talk about, hey, you need to start a new habit, you need to develop a goal, maybe you need to have new habits. And it just oftentimes comes across as feeling like people are asking you to do more and more and more. And again, you go back to that question I asked earlier, do you feel like the day is running you, or are you running your day? Sometimes it's not about adding more. It's about doing what matters the most. It's about doing what is most valuable, those most valuable actions. One key point from Dan Martell's video is that small, consistent actions actually lead to significant outcomes over time. It's very easy to feel overwhelmed by everything that we're juggling. But building habits doesn't mean that we're making unsustainable changes. Start with small action steps. Take those small everyday actions that can stretch you just enough to grow you. Think about how you teach your students. You don't take a year's worth of learning and throw it at them all in one day. No, it's like one of my professors I had back during my master's program when I was getting my educational leadership degree. He said he presented the syllabus for the year, and it was a massive, what felt like a book of a syllabus. And every student in the classroom, every one of the professionals, these are professionals. I was a professional. I was a teacher. I already had my bachelor's degree. And I'm sitting here looking at this book going, oh my goodness, how are we going to get all this done in a year's time? This seems insurmountable. And the professor looked around the room and he was looking at all of us and our faces, and he read the room. He read everybody's face, and he said, kind of a strange statement, but a good statement. He said, how do you eat an elephant? As I said, every good bit of learning typically starts with a good question, right? So he said, how do you eat an elephant? And we all started looking at each other like, what's this guy talking about? He's talking about eating an elephant. Like, we're looking at this book of a syllabus. I'm like, what is going on? And then he holds up his finger and he simply says, you start eating an elephant one bite at a time. Small, actionable steps that stretch you just enough to grow. Dan Martell in his video also reminds us that the key to sustained progress is focusing on what creates leverage. Interesting way to put that. When you think about habits that maximize your impact without overextending yourself, when you start to attain those, you start to master those habits, you really find that you're able to leverage those habits. You're able to leverage those, especially when it comes to, sustained progress with student learning. Find out what matters most. Take those small actionable steps that will stretch you just enough to grow as a teacher, and start making incremental, small, but actionable growth with your students each and every day. For example, instead of overhauling your entire morning routine right now, maybe begin by adding maybe, again, just the 5 minutes of quiet reflection, goal setting, just to set a positive tone for your day. And these small actions can build momentum and confidence as this starts to spill over into your classroom and spill over into what you're actually teaching your students. Maybe it's not all about the content. If you're an Algebra 1 teacher out there, yes, it's extremely important what you're teaching our students, but there's also one little extra element that you as a person, you have specific experiences that no one else on earth has that you can share with your students. And you can pour into them more than Algebra 1 content, maybe a little bit of life experience, maybe a little bit of knowledge about how to be a better person. If you're out there teaching social studies, or maybe it's science, whatever it may be, one of the main points I always make as a speaker when I come in and speak to different audiences and teachers and educational leaders, one thing I always say is that you are so much more as a teacher, as an educator, as a leader. You are so much more than just your content. There's only one of you. You are unique, and you have something so valuable to share with the students. So again, as you start to take those small actionable steps, as you start to expand who you are, you start to pour into yourself and create those habits, making those choices every single day that will make you a better person, a better teacher. It's going to be amazing to watch what happens as that momentum starts to take off, that confidence starts to build, and the impact that it will have on your students and their learning and their progress as they become amazing human beings. So as always, my goal is to give you some practical examples, some practical steps, something tangible that you can walk away with and implement today, tomorrow, in order to make big action, in order to make a difference, in order to make life-changing impact as a teacher. So one thing, I mentioned it a couple of times on here, is already the morning routine. And I don't know, some of you may have read this book. If you haven't, I really, really encourage you to go purchase it, go read it. Maybe you have an e-reader, whatever it may be. But it's The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. It's a fantastic guide for creating a morning routine that really fuels your mind, your body, your spirit. And again, it's about starting your day with maybe activities, maybe it's reading, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's light exercise, but it sets the tone for success. And it's amazing how when you start your day achieving a goal, it may be just read. Let's take reading, the first one I mentioned there. It could be saying, all right, I'm going to read just 5 minutes. My goal is to read 5 minutes in this book that's maybe it's about teaching. Maybe it's not about teaching. Maybe it's about a goal that you have. Maybe it's reading about a hobby that you have. And whatever it may be, when you set that goal, you read for 5 minutes and you're like, okay, Paul, like 5 minutes of reading, big deal, right? It's amazing what happens in your mindset, in your brain, whenever you achieve a goal first thing in the morning, first thing when you wake up, 5 minutes into the day, and you have achieved a goal. You set the tone for the day that you are a goal achiever, that you get things done, that you win, that you succeed. Amazing what happens when you set that tone for success. With that idea of the importance of your morning routine, maybe that can impact the habits that you choose to start building shortly thereafter when you wake up in the morning. One of the things that I also talk about often is the idea of classroom habits. One of my favorite habits that I started in my classroom shortly after becoming a teacher back in 2005, one of my favorite habits was starting each lesson with what I called a life lesson with Mr. Miller. These life lessons with Mr. Miller were simple stories. I would start class there every day, and I would only spend maybe 5-7 minutes on this story. It didn't take long, but it was a story about something I did, something in my life, something, a lot of times they were mistakes that I made as a high school student. They were mistakes I made as a college student, even as an adult. Being real with my students and telling them that I made mistakes, I don't know, something magical happened when I would just be a real person with my students. All of a sudden, I was accessible. all of a sudden I wasn't some sage on a stage, but I was somebody they could relate with, somebody that makes mistakes and learns how to grow from their mistakes. Our students need that example every day. So when I would start my lessons with the life lesson from Mr. Miller, I would tell them these often funny stories, often stories again about mistakes I had made. Sometimes I would take stories from other individuals. Sometimes they were my friends. Sometimes they were family members. Sometimes they were just great stories about amazing Olympic athletes and different things like that. If there was a lesson to be learned from it, I was telling them it actually typically didn't have anything to do with the content I was teaching. It could be in government class or the economics class I was teaching or the US history class or an AP class I was teaching, but I would always take the time to start my classroom. It was a classroom habit that would stretch me a little bit as a teacher every day to make sure that I had some life lessons, something that my students can learn from that was a little bit bigger than my content. It set the tone every day in my classroom with this positive energy. The students felt grounded, they felt connected, and they knew that they had received something that was going to be valuable later on in life and set the tone for the rest of that class period that what we were going to be talking about had value. Because in the first 5 to 7 minutes, I had established through this small classroom habit that there was going to be something valuable they could take and learn from and use for the rest of their life. It's amazing what happens when you set the tone in the first few minutes of a class, that you as the teacher are giving your students something that's valuable, that you are pouring into them, that you are accessible to them, that you are a real person because of a simple classroom habit. The third thing I want to talk about or give to you as a tangible item, you can go and implement this tomorrow, is just the idea that simple self-care habits are so important. And you as a teacher, especially, you need to take time, make habits that rejuvenate you. As teachers, I think we often put ourselves last. We put ourselves on that back burner. And it's important, whether it's in the morning, whether it's in the afternoon, whether it's in the evening time, it's important to take some time for you. Self-care habits. This idea that teachers are burning out, well, it's kind of fueling the great teacher resignation that we've seen in our country and around the world over the past couple of years. And I think it's, again, this idea that we, as teachers, as educators, we pour into our job, we pour into our students, we pour into our schools and our communities. And oftentimes it's expected, maybe in some way, or we feel that it's expected that we should put ourselves last. And I would say that making time for yourself, to rejuvenate yourself, to pour into yourself a little bit, is going to pay huge dividends with your students and their success, your school and its success. Take the time. I heavily encourage you to take the time to pour into yourself. Find out really what works for you. Taking care of yourself is essential for sustaining your energy, for sustaining your passion for teaching, what you do. And it can be as simple, again, as taking that walk, working out, whatever it is. I always jump to working out because, I've worked out since middle school, probably when I joined the football team and started playing football and worked out, of course, through my high school career. I continued working out when I was in college. And of course, by the time I hit college, I'd kind of set this habit, maybe it had become a routine by that point, of working out in the afternoons. And I guess my body maybe had gotten used to that. And several years ago, I was approached by a couple of friends that said, "Hey, Paul, we really want to work out. We'd love it if you'd come and join us." And there was going to be three of us that would join together for the workout. But the key is that they had too many irons in the fire in the afternoon and the evening time frames. And of course, we often said the evening is just not going to be a good time. We don't want to take time from our family. And so they said, "Hey, Paul, how about instead of the afternoon workout, what if we do a morning workout?" The one thing I knew is that every day I wanted to get a workout in because I knew how it changed me, how it made me better, how it improved my outlook, how it just made me feel more energetic. I wanted to make sure that I was still working out every day, but I definitely had to step back and say, okay, I'd love the idea of working out with my two friends, and okay, I'll give this a go. And so I went from waking up every morning about 6:45 do waking up about 5 o'clock in the morning so that I could go hit the gym with my friends and get back home in time to shower and then go and teach for the rest of the day. Go be that educator that I'd dreamed about in my mind, who I would be each day. And so I changed up my habit there, my habit of working out. I changed it up and changed up some of my routines with it because I said, okay, I'm going to go work out first thing in the morning with my friends. And after almost, I would say, 8 months of doing this, I found myself after working out on the regular since I was in middle school, I found myself not liking working out anymore, not liking weightlifting anymore. And it was a very strange thing for me. And I couldn't figure it out for the longest time until I stepped back and started to think about it from what had happened. I changed my habit. I'd changed my routine of when I worked out. And even though I was still practicing a self-care habit of working out, weightlifting, I changed it up and I found out that, as I was waking up earlier in the morning, I felt like I was going to sleep earlier in the evenings and I felt like I was losing out on time with my family. The very thing I wanted to protect and the reason I wouldn't go work out in the evening hours was to protect this time with my family. But I was still losing that time because I was going to bed earlier and earlier as I was tired and more tired, tired earlier in the evening due to getting up early to go do that workout. And so as hard as it was for me to make this decision, I had to have a conversation with my friends. I had to tell them, hey, listen, I think I'm actually going to go back to my old workout routine where I work out right after I'm done at work and before I go home so that I can spend those evening hours with my family and not be so sleepy. Now, something as simple as the time frame of when you work out, you have to make sure that your self-care habits, your self-care routines, that they work for you and that they support you, that they rejuvenate you, that they give you that sustainable energy and that they can fuel your passion for doing what you do every day, which is being a life-changing teacher. So here's the big takeaway for today. Routines and habits, they really are the foundation of effective teaching as well as having a balanced life. So start small, stay consistent, and focus on the habits that make the biggest difference, that have the biggest impact. And before we wrap up, I just want to know if you're one of the experienced educators out there, or maybe you're new to this field of education, you're a new teacher. I'm sure all of you have maybe found some habits, some routines that help you the most as a teacher. And what I'd love for you to do is just take a moment and share it in the comments below, and tag a fellow educator, if you will, who might need to hear this reminder today. So let's keep each other built up and let's thrive together. And until next time, remember, you're not just a teacher, you're a change maker. Keep striving, keep inspiring, and don't quit. This is D. Paul Miller. I'll see you for the next episode.